Have you ever just, taken a pill and then stopped to wonder what happens next? Well, today, we're going to follow that tiny pill on its absolutely incredible journey through your body. Seriously, it's this amazing story of survival, strategy, and some wild cellular chemistry that kicks off the second you swallow a tablet. Let's dive. It's a fantastic question, isn't it? It almost feels like magic. How in the world does that ibuprofen know to go right to your headache? Well, the truth is, it doesn't. Not exactly. The real story is so much more interesting, and it's all about this really delicate dance between the drug and your body. So, to really get this dance, we have to meet our two main players. On one side, you've got pharmacokinetics. That's the story of what your body does to the drug. Think of it like a super intense obstacle course. And then on the other side, you've got pharmacodynamics. That's what the drug does to your body once it finally gets where it's going. Nailing this relationship is like the key to all of modern medicine. All right, so before a drug can even think about doing its job, it first has to survive a pretty brutal journey. This is pharmacokinetics, what we're calling the body's gauntlet. It's a whole four-stage process that's designed to absorb, distribute, break down, and ultimately get rid of anything that comes inside. This entire journey can actually be summed up with a really simple acronym, ADME. That stands for absorption, distribution, metabolism, and elimination. So let's kick things off with that first step, absorption. First up, absorption. Look, unless a drug is injected right into a vein, it has to find a way to get into the bloodstream. For a pill, that means surviving the harsh acid of your stomach and then making its way through the walls of your gut just to get into circulation. It's the first huge hurdle to overcome. And that brings us to the super important idea called bioavailability. As you can see, a drug given by IV goes straight into the blood, right? So 100% of it is available to do its job. But a pill? It has to run that gauntlet of the gut and the liver first, and a big chunk of it gets destroyed along the way. This is called the first pass effect, and it's exactly why the dose for a pill is often way higher than the IV dose for the very same drug. Okay, so the part of the drug that survived absorption is now in the bloodstream. Stage 2. Distribution. It's kind of like hopping on the body's massive highway system. The drug goes everywhere that blood flows, but some of the molecules get slowed way down because they bind to proteins like albumin. This basically sticks them in the slow lane, and that affects how quickly they can actually get to work. Now, as soon as the drug is distributed, the body immediately starts trying to get rid of it. This is metabolism, and the star player here is the liver. The liver is like a chemical processing plant. It uses a two-phase system to make drugs more water-soluble, which just means it's easier for the kidneys to flush them out later. It's a really sophisticated cleanup operation. And this is where things get really wild. A family of liver enzymes called cytochrome P450 does most of this heavy lifting. But some substances, which we call inducers, can actually speed these enzymes up. That clears the drug from your system faster, making it less effective. A handy way to remember some of these is the mnemonic PCRABS for phenytoin, carbamazepine, rifampin, alcohol, barbiturates, and St. John's wort. And on the flip side, you've got inhibitors, which slow these enzymes down. This is risky because it can cause a drug to build up to toxic levels. The most famous example? Grapefruit juice. Seriously. A great mnemonic for inhibitors is GPAC-MAN. That's grapefruit, protease inhibitors, azole antifungals, cimetidine, macrolides, amiodarone, and non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers. And this is a perfect example of why it's so important to tell your doctor about every single thing you're taking. Okay, so our little drug has survived the body's gauntlet. It's been absorbed, distributed, and it's fighting off being metabolized. Now, finally, it's ready for its mission. Let's switch gears to pharmacodynamics and see how the drug actually gets the job done. The real secret to how a drug works comes down to this one idea, the receptor. Just think of receptors as tiny little locks on the surface of your cells. Drugs are designed to be very specific keys that can fit into those specific locks. And when the right key finds the right lock, boom, it triggers a response inside the cell. Now, there are basically two main types of these keys. An agonist is a key that fits the lock perfectly and turns it. It activates the receptor and causes an effect. But an antagonist is a key that fits in the lock, but it doesn't turn. It just sits there, physically blocking any other keys, our agonists, from getting in and doing their job. And if we want to get just a little more technical, there are two main flavors of these antagonists. A competitive antagonist literally fights the agonist for the exact same spot on the receptor, for the keyhole. You can actually overcome it just by flooding the area with more of the agonist.
A non-competitive antagonist, though, is sneakier. It binds to a totally different spot and changes the shape of the lock itself, so the agonist key doesn't even fit anymore. And you can't overcome that just by adding more of the agonist.
So, with all of this information, how the body messes with the drug and how the drug messes with the body, how do scientists figure out the right dose? Well, it's all about finding that just right, or Goldilocks zone, the sweet spot that balances getting the job done while making sure the patient stays safe.
This brings us to two final, absolutely crucial concepts: potency and efficacy. Potency is all about the amount of drug you need to get an effect. So drug A here is more potent because you need a smaller dose to get a response. Efficacy, on the other hand, is the maximum effect a drug can have. In this case, drug A is also more efficacious. It creates a bigger overall effect. But it's really important to remember, more potent doesn't always mean better. Sometimes a less potent but highly efficacious drug is exactly what you need. And finally, how do we measure safety? We use something called the therapeutic index. It's actually a pretty simple ratio. You take the dose that's toxic to half the population and divide it by the dose that's effective for half the population. A drug with a high therapeutic index is very safe. There's a really wide gap between an effective dose and a dangerous one. A low number, though, means that drug needs to be monitored very, very carefully. So why does this super intricate dance of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics matter so much? Well, because understanding this relationship is literally the foundation of all modern medicine. It's how we turn chemical compounds into treatments that save lives. At the end of the day, it really all boils down to this. This entire field of study is dedicated to one thing: maximizing the good a drug can do while minimizing the harm it might cause. It's a constant balancing act that protects millions of patients every single day. And that leads to a pretty fascinating final thought. We've become incredibly good at predicting this whole dance. So as our technology and our understanding gets even better, is it possible we could one day design a perfect drug? One that only does exactly what we want, where we want it, with absolutely no side effects at all? It's something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.